Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. We will be talking about vRealize Network Insight and how it has use cases with NSX. And we have a lovely panel over here. We got David, Jacob, Marty, and Ryan. So it's going to be a really exciting discussion. Looking forward to it. Before we kick it off, I just want to say that these are the 4 big areas for VMware, where VMware is helping customers achieve some of these strategic priorities. And the solutions that we will be talking about today are going to be focusing on transforming security in your data center. So with that, you guys want to kick it off with introductions?
Sure. My name is actually Brandon Lovelace. I'm with Santa Barbara City College.
I'm Jacob McClanahan. I'm from City Utilities in Springfield, Missouri.
Marty Urcheson with Alliant Credit Union out of Chicago, Illinois.
Hi, my name is Ryan Bradley. I'm a manager with Deloitte Consulting out of Philadelphia.
Great. So can you tell us more about your roles and your organization?
So I am kind of the data center lead. I've been implementing VMware since GSX, if anyone knows what that product is. And have been leading the way in trying to modernize our data center and secure it up against internal and external threats. So that's kind of my basic role.
I manage the infrastructure team for City Utilities, and CU is a unique utility because we do gas, water, electric, transit, and broadband. And all those have their own unique challenges and regulatory needs.
I'm a senior systems engineer and part of the engineering team. We got eight guys on the team. We're responsible for the virtualization side of it, storage, compute. That's it.
So like I said, I'm with Deloitte Consulting, a professional services company who, in summary, we help our clients solve the most complex challenges. I've personally been with Deloitte for about 5 years and IT for 10. I came from a very technical background through operations, engineering, and then architecture. I'm a cloud and infrastructure guy is what I like to refer to myself as, at least. And then what I try to do, I guess, on a daily basis is find ways to use technology to solve business problems.
Great. So before we start with the serious stuff, let's warm it up a little bit. And one quick fun fact about you guys. You want to start, Ryan?
Yeah, so he just asked me just a minute ago to think about a fun fact. So I'm thinking, what's a funny thing?
It's totally out of the blue, unrehearsed.
So I'm a big sports fan, and I planned on going to this conference, way back, even before that I knew that the big fight was happening on Saturday night. So I get here, and I'm very excited to watch it, even if it's going to be on TV or whatever. But I'm also getting a little bit old as well. So I had to check into a restaurant very early to be able to get a spot to watch it on TV, and I ended up having to go home before it even started because I was too tired. So I was asleep before the fight even started, woke up in the middle of the night, checked, I saw who won, and then I watched it on YouTube the next day. So I guess I'm getting a little bit, old age.
When you were rooting for Mayweather?
I just wanted to see it. There was so much hype for it, I was just excited to see it. So I did get to see it the next day, but.
Cool.
I guess I used to be a mechanic back in the day, and I'm actually building a car with my son. We're taking a 93 Mustang and cutting it up, and it'll be streetable, but it's pretty much for the strip.
I spend so much time in the digital world, I like to do something analog with my hands. So I'm not building a race car, but I do like doing woodworking, specifically like turning with bowls and pens and stuff like that. So that's fun.
Awesome.
I'm AYSO intermediate referee finishing my advanced, and so that's what I do on the weekend. I run out and chase kids around on soccer fields.
Nice. Interesting. Okay, so can you tell us more about how your IT organizations are structured? Is it like multiple teams managing network ops, security ops, VI, or is it a single team?
So for me, I'm probably the easiest use case. It's single team, and it's pretty much me for everything. I do it from storage all the way out to the network, and then once we get to the network and to our public-facing network, thankfully it turns into somebody else. But as far as infrastructure inside the data center, it's, I pick it out, I install it, I install the operating systems, and keep it all up to date. So
One-man army.
I am what Google likes to call a one-bus factor.
Cool. How about you, Jacob?
For us, we looked at infrastructure a long time ago and decided that VMware was a key piece of infrastructure. So the infrastructure team is made of network engineers, storage engineers, and then security, DBAs, and web ops.
Well, we're a credit union, so we actually have to abide by some regulations, but we are siloed. So I'm part of the systems engineering team. We have a networking team. We have a security team. We have an InfoSec team. There's a fraud team. So and DBAs and our DevOps. Everybody has their own teams.
I see. Interesting. So Ryan, you obviously work with a lot of customers, right? First question, what is the typical size of customers you work with? And then related to that, do you see trends in the way IT organizations are being organized or built out?
So the size, I mean, it really varies, right? Like I said, I serve clients of all different sizes in all different industries. Typically Fortune 100, Fortune 50, so the very large companies. And I think that as the enterprises get bigger, we see more and more of the silos, right? That's just business as usual. That's how it's done. There's a lot of reasons for that, right? It works and it always has worked, right? Mm-hmm. I think that moving forward with products like NSX, right? We started to see those. Those lines are starting to blur, right? So at some point you have to break down the silos or at least attempt to merge them. But we see those commonalities pretty much across the board.
Interesting. And guys, if you have any questions for our panelists at any time, just feel free to raise your hand and walk up to the mic. Yes. Yeah, please.
One second.
Guess not.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I work for a fellow credit union, and we are trying to understand how we're going to move from our 98 firewalls to, this sounds familiar, I'm sure, to a consolidated design using NSX micro-segmentation. So we're just embarking on that journey. I would love to hear a little bit from Marty or from the rest of the panel. If you went through that journey, how did it go? What kind of tools did you use? What are the tips that we should really kind of focus on to make it successful, both from the tools that we should have, as an example, is vRealize an essential element or not, or et cetera. And the second part of it is, what are the thoughts about the team composition, right? We are also siloed, kind of the same way that you described. Is that a good way to continue here, or should we consider changing that? Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll definitely touch upon those points. Anything else that any of you guys want to take away from this session so we can structure that discussion accordingly? Any other key points you want us to hit? Okay, so we will talk about all of the 4 use cases, including micro-segmentation. Yes, sir.
So specifically on micro-segmentation, I didn't get a sense of how big any of your companies were, but my thing is around how do you use micro-segmentation at scale so that micro-segmentation obviously gives you a lot of power, but it can also become something very quickly that could be unwieldy to manage. If you're saying, okay, for every application, I'm going to put a little bubble around the app in the middle, the web tier, the app tier, the database tier, then multiply that by thousands, and then that's not good. So I'm just kind of curious if any of you have challenged, or have been dealt with the challenge of managing micro-segmentation at scale.
Great. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure all of our panelists can speak to that, but Ryan, I'm pretty sure, has also worked with a lot of big customers, right? So Ryan can speak to that as well.
Sure. So it's not an easy answer, I guess, is what I'll say. Right. Typically, we always recommend to start small. Right. Start small. Pick a couple of the key components that are very important, and then build that out. I guess I'm not sure exactly, what kind of scale. If we're talking about, 10,000, 50,000 VMs, across multiple data centers and multiple locations, it definitely gets difficult. So, we always recommend, like I said, start small, build on. I haven't ever pushed those kind of limits, I think. I think that's what he was asking, right? Have we pushed the limit to see where it fails? And I haven't seen that.
Okay, so speaking of scale, can you guys tell us more about how big your data center is? Give us an idea of the scale of your data centers.
So we're a multi-site institution, and I have a data center at each of our campuses. So we have about 4 data centers. We have one primary data center and then kind of small secondary data centers at the remote sites. In our primary data center, we have about 400 server-based VMs and another 700 plus Horizon workspace kind of desktops that we use to serve student labs. At scale question, it's really solved with Composer. It's the useful tool in the NSX suite, in my opinion, anyway.
Okay, and you also have a VDI environment, right?
Yes, we do. We have a pretty large one. It's serving all of our student labs on and off campus. We're doing RDSH on top of that to deliver apps to students and try and make them more successful at all hours of the day, not just when we're open.
Okay, yeah, and I think that's unique about David, that he has is managing both data center and VDI environments where he has NSX and Verni.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Jacob?
We have 2 data centers. There's about 600 VMs between the 2 of them. One's primary, the other one's more for DR, test recovery type situation. We don't have thousands of applications, but we have hundreds of applications. Most of those are legacy stuff that it's hard to identify what you need to do with it. And so that's where VRNI really helps kind of figure out, what is this, who's it talking to, why is it talking to it, how much traffic's going back and forth. Very important tool for us.
Marty?
Yeah, well, we have 2 data centers, and then we have a 3rd DR site, about 1,170 VMs, 6 vCenters, 6 NSX managers. And
6 NSX managers, wow.
yeah, well, 1 per vCenter. So that's what we have. We do have VDI in our development. We have about, I think that's about 100 people there. And then we are in the process of migrating from Citrix to VDI right now, and we just stood that up. Hopefully we'll start testing at the end of the year.
Okay, great. So can you guys talk more about what your key IT priorities, so first, what your key IT priorities have been for, let's say, the last 1 year, and do you see those changing or evolving in the next 3 to 5 years?
So in the past year, our kind of prior to this year, I guess would be a better thing, has been consolidation and virtualization. I think just this year, I pretty much hit about 99% virtualization. I have one lone server that is hard to touch and move that's still physical. So once we got all that kind of hammered down, people finally realized security was an actual thing they cared and wanted to pay money for. And so we've been shifting our focus more towards security. And to that end, using NSX and vRealize Network Insight to gain that insight to actually intelligently implement NSX.
Okay, great.
In the last year, utility industry has been in the news quite a bit about the grid and hacking the grid. And so cybersecurity is a main focus for us. And micro-segmentation was a good step towards securing our utilities.
Yeah, well, it's the same for us, security. We have pretty much firewalls everywhere you turn. They just consolidated the firewalls from 35 vSys's down to 5. We actually just integrated it into Network Insight, which actually gives us visibility into the firewall rules, which we really didn't have before at my team. So we'd always have to bother the security folks. But our main focus is security. It's always, we're dealing with financial, money. So, and I have a vested interest because I'm a member myself. So. Okay.
Ryan, well, what kinds of IT priorities do you see typically with customers?
So a common trend that I've been seeing is IT organizations are shifting towards capabilities, right? What type of service offerings to meet the business users' use cases, right? And then, of course, security is a big part of that. And especially as public cloud adoption just continues to expand, right? I mean, a business user or a business unit could, with a credit card number, they could very quickly open an account in public cloud and quickly take advantage of those services, right? So, the key challenge there is how do I secure that, right? So, it might not be ready for prime time right now, but the NSX, micro-segmentation as a service type of capabilities that, same exact rule set, same exact policies, procedures on-prem and off, is very powerful. And then IT organizations has choices, right? They can either embrace the move to the public cloud and put those policies and restrictions and rules around it, or they can try to bring those capabilities in-house, right? And I think the answer is probably a combination of the both, right? Build out some of those public cloud service-like services, I guess, in-house, but then also build the bridge so that your business users can also take advantage of the hundreds of services that are out there from these different cloud providers.
Okay. And David, Jacob, Martin, how about you guys? Are you looking at public clouds? Do you already have workloads in public clouds?
So my VP wants us to move to the public cloud, specifically AWS. And we are making strides to get there, but when a lot of your infrastructure is already bought and paid for and running, it's hard to get the application teams to fix their applications so you can implement them in a new environment. And because you're going to have to, install a modern operating system and then get them over there, given their already existing workloads. So it's been a very slow, tedious process of getting there, unfortunately.
Okay. So quick show of hands. How many of you guys are looking at considering public clouds or already have workloads in public clouds? Okay, so substantial number, almost 50% of the audience. So before we dive deeper into the use cases, let's do a quick show of hands for people who don't know what NSX is. Anyone? Okay, that's a relief. Anyone who's new to Verney, vRealize Network Insight. Sorry, I know this session is being recorded, and I'm not allowed to use acronyms, especially Verney. But anyone here who's not familiar with vRealize Network Insight? Okay, so a couple of guys. So vRealize Network Insight is basically providing intelligent operations across your private and public clouds for networking and security. Right? So for compute and storage, we have vRealize operations that provides intelligent performance management, troubleshooting capabilities, capacity planning, all of those capabilities. And for networking and security in your data center and on AWS now, we have vRealize Network Insight. So it has these 4 big use cases. The first one is planning micro-segmentation. So customers, when they have NSX or even before they have NSX, they can use vRealize Network Insight to actually look at flow analytics within their data center and figure out what micro-segmentation should look like with NSX. So that's the big use case. The other use case is being able to troubleshoot and get visibility across your virtual and physical infrastructure. The third capability is obviously once you have NSX deployed, it helps you manage and scale your NSX deployments. And the final use case is securing AWS infrastructure. So this is a comparatively newer capability that we introduced in our June release, 3.4. So with vRealize Network Insight, you can actually do security plan. You can look at flows inside your Amazon Web Services VPCs, right? So you can look at flows between VPCs in your AWS account or within a particular VPC between security groups. And you can also use it to troubleshoot EC2 instances, security groups, firewall rules in AWS, all of the good stuff. So that's just a quick overview of what vRealize Network Insight is and does. How many of you guys are already vRealize Network Insight customers? Okay, so about 25% of the room. That's great. So let's start by talking about how you guys decided you wanted to do, and obviously you guys said security was already top of your mind, so that's why you chose to do micro-segmentation. But how did you go about assessing? Did you assess vRealize Network Insight? Did you use the assessment? Did you start off with a small proof of concept and then scale up? Can you talk more about that journey?
So the college had a 25 VM instance of NSX back when you could buy it that way. And during the process of kind of renegotiating our ELA with VMware, our sales guys said, hey, how about you do NSX with vRealize Network Insight? And I'm like, oh, that's that thing I saw a year ago in VMworld and thought looked pretty neat, but haven't heard much about since. And so we did kind of a quick proof of concept that it would be a value add to the buy, and went ahead and it saw the value, saw what it could do for us when we were trying to figure out what traffic was actually doing, how to implement the rules, what makes sense, you know, traffic coming and going out of the data center, all this kind of analytics that was non-existent. You didn't kind of really have any idea what anything was doing. Even my developers didn't know what their applications were doing sometimes. So we saw the value and went ahead and went with the NSX plus vRealize Network Insight as part of our renegotiating of our ELA this past year.
Last year we did a proof of concept on NSX and realized that to deploy the way we wanted to would take extra resources, probably an extra head count, just the way we wanted to structure things and the infrastructure that we had. And last year at VMworld, we saw the Network Insight and was like, this is the tool we really need. And we bought it right after VMworld, been using it since. We did not need that extra head count. Didn't even need consulting services to install it and get it configured. We did it all on our own. It's been a very beneficial tool for us, you know, as far as a micro-segmentation, but also knowing what's going on in your network. If you guys have seen it or play with it, there's a really nice dashboard of just what's going on, who's the top talkers, who's doing a lot of data transfer, storage. It's like the top 10 list of everything. And just one button, you can take a really close look at that and see what's going on. So that was really beneficial.
We actually, I'll go back to the micro-segmentation, start there. We actually started that about 3 years ago, but we did it with a competitor's product, and it wasn't pretty. Lots of problems, poor support. So we had a bad taste in our mouth with the micro-segmentation off of that. What we ended up doing was, you know, basically rebuilding the environment, putting it on vCenter 6, and we were just using VDS. And things that weren't working in the competitor's product, when we moved to the VDS, everything worked fine. We know we needed micro-segmentation, so we implemented NSX. However, we kind of did it reverse, I guess, because we're still working through the rule set and things like that. We have some in there. We don't have it fully implemented. But what we did is we actually did the load balancing functions and guest introspection. So what we were targeting was, we got tired of seeing performance issues with the AV and malware agents. So what we've been doing is pulling those off and replacing it with the guest introspection. We're using Trend Micro. You know, so that's our first attack at that. It allowed us to get some resources back. You know, performance is up, but we are doing the NSX piece. And with VRNI, what we did, we started, I believe, in March. We had a 3-month assessment or so. It's now actually in production. We plugged in our actually external firewalls. We plugged them into it. So now you get to see this traffic flow. It's actually remarkable what you see. You'll see everything. And what we do is we can drill down and we can actually select that firewall, and it will show us that firewall rule set that we're hitting and that we're going through. So our networking team and security team just started getting into it. Like I say, we're pretty early into VRNI, but we see a lot of benefits. We've actually used it for reverse engineering. So we're migrating off of Citrix into VDI. So we have to go through all our apps and determine what talks to what, how it talks to it. So what we did is actually one of our team members reverse engineered it, and he used then a VRNI for that. So, and we've been doing troubleshooting, myself and another guy. I think he actually takes all of our connectivity tickets now because he likes using Bernie so much. So.
All right, and just to set the standard for the audience here, there's an assessment that's called Virtual Network Assessment, VNA, and that's the assessment that we have been talking about. And it's basically, it's a lighter version of the entire product that you can just deploy in your data center, and typically customers start seeing insight in the first couple of hours. How long did it take for you guys to start seeing or getting insights from the assessment or from the whole product?
Really, it was the next day.
Yeah.
You know, you got to plug it in. It's got to start pulling data and start correlating some of that. So it takes a little bit of time. Immediately, you can start seeing things after the first few minutes, but give it a few days, give it a few weeks, and that's when you really see the benefits.
The appliance will claim it's 2 hours before you can actually start getting stuff, but
That's true.
if you're like me, you did it at the end of the day and you went home and looked at it the next day. So
Yeah, it was pretty quick. We got, I think actually we did the same thing as another guy actually implemented it, but the next day we had information in there. And then, like I say, when we plugged it in to the firewalls, our external ones, now we can delve down, we can see a lot of things. And I will tell you, we probably have a couple hundred VLANs. So I don't know if anybody, I guess not, but if you've ever seen the dashboard and you go down and look and see what's connected to what, I had saw it in a previous session. Ours are a million little slivers, with lines all over. So, and then you just use that, you drill down to see what's connecting to what.
Okay. So the assessment also gives information about how micro-segmentation can help you in your data center. It has statistics such as east-west traffic percentage, switch versus routed percentage, and it's basically the same as the big product, but with a few limitations. So Ryan, I know you have worked a lot of customers on having NSX deployed in their data centers. What percentage of those customers typically start with the virtual network assessment?
Tough question, I guess. So we're kind of in a unique situation, right? Being a partner, a service integrator, and also a competitor, right? Kind of full circle there.
By the way, you heard Marty's comments about competitors, right?
We'll stay away from there. I really can't give any kind of estimate like that. I would be guessing if anything else. So, from my small sample size, not many. But
okay.
But once again, I don't want to step over.
Okay, cool. That's good. Any questions from the audience so far? Yes. Micro-segmentation, right?
The question was, how did VRNI, if at all, affected the implementation? Maybe the question is, how did you guys go about implementing micro-segmentation, transitioning from traditional firewalls to segmented firewall configuration with VRNI or without it? How was the journey? What are the details? We got marketed out to us.
Yeah. Well, for us, like I said, we consolidated our external firewall from these multiple VSys's down. We're actually now being able to get good data out of things, because before it was very confusing. But what VRNI has done, it's giving, well, what we're going to do with NSX is I don't see us really getting rid of the other firewalls. What this is it's complementing, right? So anything east-west is going to be inspected. Right now, if you have a web server, unless you carved it up on a VLAN of sorts, right, and ran it, and you're doing hairpinning going out and coming back into the environment, the other web servers can see one another, right? So what micro-segmentation is going to do, it's going to carve all that up for you. So, and it's actually, one thing I'll say is we are going to be looking at the security tags to implement that on the firewall rules, only because we did some dynamic name, if this is in a name, right, of the name of a VM, that actually, we actually had something called TST. There was a deny rule. Any server with TST in there can't talk to another server with TST. Well, we were setting up some test servers for our DBAs, and we're sitting there going, what the heck's going on? These two servers can't talk, and they're on the same VLAN. And it turned out we didn't know the rule set was in place because the security team had put it in there during their testing, but they had never turned it off. So we based on some of those things, we're saying, well, we're going to go with security tags. So that means it forces somebody to make an update to the VM. You put a tag on that VM, so now somebody knows and there's trackability to it. Whereas if you did the dynamic, which it's very flexible, but it also can come back and haunt you. In our case, that's what happened. But VRNI gives you all this view, right? So you can actually see what's talking to what, and you can use that to build your rules in NSX. And we're in the early stages. We're like you. I mean, like I said, we started with the load balancing and the guest introspection, and we're just starting to implement the firewall rules. So that's where we're at with it.
So you haven't actually used VRNI for the pro implementation?
We have not. We bought it. We actually had all of our NSX. We had all the environments up. And what we use VRNI for troubleshooting. A lot of it, troubleshooting, reverse engineering, And going forward, though, we're looking to put that in and have it help us build our NSX rules.
Is that a shared experience?
So I had a different experience with NSX and VRNI. I did have a very small NSX footprint deployed before I got VRNI. But I was using it for like one server that was basically a web server. I was kind of playing around with it. I was understanding what it was, how this different firewall rule set worked, what this view the NSX composer thing was. Honestly, the very first thing I did in NSX was stand up a Minecraft server for my kid and firewall off the ports. See what really it is. Really do something simple and make it fun at the same time. So once I kind of got the hang of that, what we're doing inside of NSX is we're using the composer, which is the automated rules, and putting it into basically regular expression mode where you can do some really serious name pattern matching, so you don't end up accidentally writing test in a name and picking up TST when you really mean TST, and having very strict naming rules when you're creating VMs so that the rules get automatically applied. I did start with the traditional firewall method. If anyone has, we used to have a checkpoint firewall, big giant chains of firewalls. At least they let you group them so it's a little cleaner, but it gets really hard to read really, really fast. So I started doing Composer. But once we got the full-blown NSX licensing and the VRNI, I started talking to our application developers about, hey, what does this server really do? I don't understand it. You had me stand it up. You're doing stuff with it. What's going on with it? And they're like, oh, it contains everybody's social security number. I'm like, well, okay, well, I need to move it over here now. How is it talking? What is it talking to? And they're like, well, we think it talks here, and we think it talks here, and it's probably doing this. And so with that kind of information, I can actually go into VRNI or Network Insight and go and confirm that what they're telling me is true, and then also go, oh, and by the way, you're also talking over here. Do you really want to be talking over there? And usually they go, oh yeah, we forgot about that. And so I can then take that data from Network Insight and apply intelligent rules inside of the traditional kind of firewall rule set if it's not something I can kind of fit within Composer, or then write it in Composer with my tagging set so that, you know, I stand up a test database server and it gets stuck in the test segment of database servers, but has the same database rules that apply to the production database server, so that if it doesn't work in tests, before it even hits prod, it'll apply right to prod. So we use the same Composer groups to apply rules to both test and production, which you can do actually separately inside a Composer. It actually works really nicely.
So for us, VRNI and Log Insight were the two tools we used to build the 700 or 800 firewall rules we have today. And we are probably halfway done, you know, with where we need to be. Really, it is going back and looking and seeing who's talking to who, over what ports, validating with the either application team or the DBA team, you know, are these the ports you're really using? The nice thing about VRNI is that you can go back in time. So, you know, what happens today, you can capture that one moment, but you need to go back 90 days or 30 days or whatever and look at that. You've got that ability. And through logs, that's really hard to do. Through, you know, Windows logs, Linux logs. VRNI just gives you that ability to kind of just time shift and say, what was going on this day? And you can build rules around that. So that's how we built all of our rules, is those two tools. That's it.
Yeah, our data architect actually had come over, and he needed to know what this particular server was doing and talking to. You know, he's fairly new on board, and it was talking externally to a vendor, and it was also talking to other servers. And we were actually able to get him that information. We exported it into an Excel and gave it to him. And like 15 minutes maybe, you know, I mean, so we were able to get that information for him real quick. And I think we're going to be challenging, as we go forward, our DevOps team to actually, you know, when they say it's supposed to be talking, you know, port 443 to this guy, that's all we're going to let happen, you know, and we're actually going to be able to track that. So.
Ryan, you want to add and talk about some of the challenges that customers typically face when they are looking to implement micro-segmentation?
Sure. So, you know, when I think of micro-segmentation, I'll kind of say it in the same word with software-defined networking and NSX, right? You know, so I'll kind of want to, that's how I'm going to approach it. So obviously skills, right? Skills are always a challenge with some new technology, but I think those can be overcome fairly easily, right? There's training, there's a lot of YouTube videos, you know, VMware YouTube channel, and, you know, plenty of material out there. But sorry. But then from an operational perspective, right, and we hear this a lot, it's probably the number one issue with deploying NSX, right? It's not necessarily technically a problem, but it's, you know, how do I get everybody to agree to use it, that it's the best path forward? And I sat in on the session in this room. It was a customer panel session very similar to this on automating NSX, and one of the customers talked about their biggest pain point about deploying NSX, and it was, quote unquote, I never thought I would hear so much pushback from the networking team, right? And that's common because, you know, forever, as long as we can remember, right, the networking team, they controlled networking rules, the security team secured the security policy, but now with NSX, like we talked about, you know, there's lines blurred, there's silos kind of come down. So there's a lot of angst there, you know, right away. So I think that one of the best strategies, you know, to deploy is to get all of those key stakeholders, all those key players on board very easily, very early, right? Get communication started early, be completely transparent, you know, where did this vision come from? And as a group, you know, how do we get together and kind of change the operational model? Because, you know, with the role-based access with NSX, you can very easily specify who has access to what, right? So the security team can still dictate security policy, the network team, network policy, but somehow together, you know, everyone needs to get on the same board. If not, you know, you're just gonna go back and forth and just knock heads forever. So the earlier you can get everybody involved in that process, I think the better.
I see. So I think that also addresses the second question you had about different teams.
Well, I can elaborate a little bit for us, because you're probably in the same situation. Our security team is managing the NSX firewall rules. Our networking team At this point, and their managers, he manages both the networking and security, but security has taken over the rule set. But the networking portion, like we're looking at a DLR, which is a logical router, they're going to kind of, I think, what I'm thinking we have is we've kind of worked on an arrangement that they'll hand it off to us, and then we'll be managing the logical routing. We're not going to be doing, probably set up OSPF on it and be done with it, but for that, but we'll be doing the routing portions within NSX. Security team will still manage the firewalls. And like you said, there is, you can granularly break down who has access to what. So, you have auditor role or a role, and you can see the firewall rules. You can't do anything with them, but they'll have the security admin role, and that's how we've set it up.
One of the actually cool things about Network Insight is as you're modifying those firewall rules, it actually shows up in some of those highlights of the day of what's been happening and changing in your environment. So it's one kind of this single pane of glass. I hate saying that. But it's kind of showing you what's going on inside of that NSX environment. In addition to all the other things that are going on, it's telling, you don't have enough nodes, you don't have your backup set up, and oh, and by the way, here's all the firewall rules that have changed since you've been in here last, and you can kind of acknowledge and look at what's going on. So if your web server stops talking to your application server, you can go in and look and go, oh, hey, look, someone applied a new rule to this thing very, very quickly without having to try and dig through some other log or track down the person who might have changed that. There's kind of all visibility there.
It also alerts you to rules that step on each other. So that's the other thing is you're building rules or other people are building rules. And you don't know that somebody else built a rule way down here because location matters that supersedes it. And NSX or the VRNI will tell you these two rules are conflicting. And you can go and troubleshoot that. It makes it a lot easier to find.
Any other questions?
In front of you.
No? Oh, yes.
What were some of your challenges with implementation in terms of not the political side of things, just the actual technical stuff? Because a lot of us have networks that are, like the typical campus networks, and then everybody's coming in and saying, oh, NSX this, NSX that. What were like the biggest pain points or like kind of like the gotcha that you can share with us in terms of making it into an easier transition?
So for me, as you say campus, I kind of know that thing. My biggest problem was my network cohort is a very cranky man and doesn't like talking to me about new networks or new anything. And I said, that's fine, I'll take care of it. I'll do kind of a hybrid approach. So I have some of our actual routed VLANs that are on our routers, and then in addition, I'm also the network guy. I'm a backup network guy, so I went ahead and just went into the routers anyway and set up an OSPF tunnel between the core routers and our NSX edge gateway, and now I route networks into there. Getting kind of that initial communication done, getting that initial understanding was a bit painful, but now once you get it in and you get that OSPF bridge up and running, if your environment supports that, standing up networks from that point forward, it's all about, what, in our case, the external firewall will allow go out. The internal network will run whatever you tell it to do, but if I need to go to the internet and our firewall guy used to have us on a /8 and I wanted to do something above that, I had to go and, knock on his door and plead to expand out the subnet mask another 8, so we use it /16 now. And those were kind of the initial problems of just getting that initial communication, getting those people to understand that I wasn't, taking over their world. I was just trying to make it easier for me to move inside of my world and to make things more secure without having to reconfigure all the routers constantly every time I wanted to build a new network to, actually start doing some of that, best practice segmentation where the production servers don't actually live on the same VLAN as our test servers, which was the case and is still the case prior to getting NSX and getting that routing bits in place.
Technically, probably one of the hardest things to do up front was to get the networking team to say, we'll reset your MTU size to 1600. Getting that was the hardest part technically. And then after that, it's just not knowing what's there. And Network Insight gives you that ability to look inside and see what's going on in the network. The virtualization of the network is so abstracted, sometimes you don't know what's going on. You don't know where things are being hairpinned. And those tools help you with that and really get some efficiencies.
Yeah, actually the MTU, that's the biggest thing for the network guys. They have to go touch everything and increase the MTU size. We haven't implemented VXLAN, but we're discussing that. In the hairpinning, actually, that's why we implemented the load balancing first, because it was internal applications that we did. And they were it was SharePoint as an example, but it was hairpinning. So you're going out to their firewall, coming back in, bouncing around to all the web servers. So what we did is we actually tried to eliminate some of that. There's still some going on, and we're hoping to address that with NSX going forward. But I don't know if you're referring to also the installation of NSX. Do you have NSX already or no? Okay. Yeah.
I'm thinking about what would be the best approach into migrating those VLANs into a VXLAN topology. Kind of like going from, 100 VLANs into a set of 10 VLANs.
That's you can keep your existing VLANs and then just network vMotion them over to your new VLANs as you set them up. And you can do, if you have DV ports, I hope. It's kind of a requirement of NSX, but.
My biggest challenge is that I need to find a way to preserve the VLAN and the subnet that's assigned to the VLAN.
You can have the same numerical value VLAN in multiple DV switches, DV, whatever it is, the
Distributed switch.
Yeah, the distributed switches.
VDS, yeah.
You have to name them differently. So like I have a VLAN that is poorly named HP Secure, has to do with some old legacy stuff, and so I can't rename it HP Secure in my NSX distributed switch, and so in the NSX distributed switch, it's NSX HP Secure. So, and I'm keeping the name. You can't, because it's, when you go to VXLAN, it starts using really high numbers. It goes up into the 3000s or 5000s, whatever you set it to be, and you just lose the whole concept of the 2047 or whatever your limitation is of VLANs altogether, unless you get into VTAP, which is a whole other deal.
So I know Jacob touched upon eliminating hairpinning, right, to improve performance. Ryan, I know you did some benchmarking around how you can use NSX and vRealize Network Insight to eliminate hairpinning. Can you talk to that?
Right. So we actually have a session on Thursday to discuss that, and excuse me, along with Bob Goldsan here, a VMware architect, who wrote a great blog post about how to eliminate hairpinning with NSX, right? So what we focused on, there's a couple of ways to eliminate. I think you kind of alluded on one, right? Is to bring those firewall rules, to pull them into the hypervisor, right? So for the east-west kind of communication, right? That's one way. Right? The other way is to fully implement VXLAN, right? That way, that traffic that used to have to go all the way out to get switched and routed and firewalled, now again, that can all take place inside the hypervisor. You might have to go through a top of rack switch to get to another host, but if there's two VMs happen to be on the same host, then it's great. You get line rate almost communication, right? And I think that where VRNI is kind of powerful is it can show you those realized benefits in a better way because of the different views and dashboards and flows of data, right? Like you can quickly see performance issues or those hairpins. Why is this communication going through all these devices when they're right next to each other? Right? So I think that then in general, just to expand on that, just the increased visibility that you get with vRealize Network Insight is pretty powerful because from my operations days, right? Troubleshooting any performance issue is always difficult. Whenever you talk about network, it's like, oh man, it's that black box that only the select few really have access to see what's going on inside those physical components, right? But now with the increased visibility of vRealize Network Insight, right? You're plugged in all those different devices, so you can quickly see where the problems might be, and at least know like where to drill down. It just helps, that troubleshooting process, I think.
You have ballpark numbers for the application performance improvement that you saw when you were doing the benchmarking?
Yeah, so what we did is we simulated multi-tiered applications, right? So we had via Apache redirects, and then with Apache Benchmark is how we scripted out, the simulated applications. But we saw at least, same host, two tiers, so two VM communication was somewhere around on different hosts, twice as fast, basically. We were able to execute our scripts twice as fast. As we added on additional tiers, that increase went up, right? So it was pretty much a linear improvement. And in our session on Thursday, we'll deep dive on that. But across the board, our test in a VXLAN NSX environment compared to a traditional non-NSX VLAN environment, across the board, all of our tests were faster. And it really varied by a couple different options. How many tiers, how much data that we put across the wire, and of course, if they're on the same host, right? If you can somehow architect your applications to have one portion of the application, all of those different tiers on the same host, you can really see some very big benefits there.
To piggyback on that, we had a script that was running from one server to multiple servers, and it was pulling down between 10 and 20 terabytes a night, just moving files back and forth. And we didn't know that until we looked at vRealize, and it showed up on the top of the list of, this server had 20 terabytes of data transferred, and it was way above everything else. So it gave us that visibility to dive in there and look at it and figure out what was going on and then tune that script a little bit.
Okay. So you can also get data from topology data across your virtual and physical devices, right? What kind of physical devices are you looking at with Verney?
For us, it's the core.
Network switches?
Yeah, top of rack and core. So the more you can put in there, the better the picture is going to be. And if you can get all your switches in there, everything between your hosts, wherever your hosts are and everything in between, if you do that, you have full visibility into your network, and you can make good decisions based on that.
Yeah, same thing. Like I said, we already put the firewall in there. We're adding the switches as we go. So it's our core switches and top of racks.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So of course all the physical network devices, but also some of your converged infrastructure, right? You can also import that to see what's going on a little bit more clearly at the host level.
Great. Yes, question?
I was wondering if you took an approach to educate your counterparts in other areas of your groups, like your network team or your source team, to get them on the same nomenclature, NSX, and understanding of micro-segmentation. Do anything formal, or did you just rely on maybe VMware or NSX or
Well, for us, we actually have been bringing our network and security guys here to VMworld. We've been talking about it for quite some time. Like I said, we had some experience with micro-segmentation with another vendor. So they all had their hands in it back then. And that's why everybody was a little reluctant to go forward with this. And it's actually been a pleasant surprise. It works as advertised. But that's between us and the networking team and then the security team, we're all talking the same speak now. But I will tell you, I think it's taken this. I think we've been working on this for 2 years. Oh yeah, no, yeah. Well, and our networking guys get very defensive on things. It's nature of the business. I know I was a networking guy at my last place, so you get beat up. But they've actually embraced it. So.
We didn't do anything formal other than just sit down and talk about what was micro-segmentation, the benefits of it. It's the same team, so it's nice. It's an open environment, and they're all sitting right there. They understand what they're talking about, so we didn't have those challenges.
I've been trying to get them to take any level of NSX, go and actually read about it, and they're fighting me tooth and nail for some reason. But I keep telling them the benefits and what we're doing, and the fact that here are where the firewalls actually roll. They're not down inside the VM like they might have to be if you didn't have NSX, and they're in a single pane of glass, and they're starting to get the hang of it. But unfortunately, they're not embracing it as well as I would hope. It's just the thing I keep working on, and it's the nature of education and union-based jobs. So. I'm not.
I've seen that a lot where if all the teams are on the same page with how micro-segmentation works, you might have a challenge getting them to engage in the discussion about moving. Sounds like these guys are all pretty great teams.
We're a team of 4, so I just kind of do what I need to do and tell them about it.
Right, so I think that generally speaking, a formal project plan-like approach is what you need. Right? It's a complicated technology. That's one part, right? But it changes a lot. There's a lot of different change. Whenever there's change, there's angst, right? So formal project plan, probably start off with the proof of concept, right? And then once you jump into it, everyone knows their roles and responsibilities. So everyone is speaking the same language and on the same page, right? Clear timeline, clear roles, responsibilities, start date, end date. But you have to go about it in a very formal approach, or just like anything else, it's just hanging out there and it won't get done.
Different set of capabilities, right? Say the firewall features of NSX versus some of the more traditional firewall technologies and how they can be built. And then there's even differences within NSX from, local, universal, type of rules and capabilities. Understanding that is critical.
Sure.
Yeah, so to touch upon some of those points and the earlier question about scaling, Ryan, do you have any best practices for people looking to implement micro-segmentation?
I think we talked about it a lot.
I know
right?
you said start small,
Right.
And then we touched upon some of the other elements. But do you want to bring it home and just give us a quick summary?
Yeah, sure. So I think about it. Number one is the plan, right? You have to have a very solid plan with the right buy-in, right? Buy-in from the top. But then also number two is to make sure that everyone is involved as early as possible, right? Be as transparent, open the lines of communication as much as possible. And then number three, we touched on this, but start small and think about what are your top priorities that you want, like what are the top things that you want to get out of SDN? Is it the firewalling? Is it the VXLAN? Whatever it is, don't bite off more than you can chew. We like to say, or it came from my boss, crawl, walk, run, right? So crawl, it's that proof of concept, test it out, walk, pick a couple of the key components, maybe low-hanging fruit, right? Get everyone familiar, comfortable, that'll help with the adoption of it. And then, the full run is when you continue to add all those different components where you truly have, SDN, SDDC. So it's really just, those three, plan, communication, and start small, work in pieces.
Okay, so I know we are running short on time. Yes, one final question.
So, along the lines of crawl, walk, and run, we implemented Burning 10 days ago on a very small environment, 2 clusters, probably 25 hosts that have been running NSX for about 2 years with zone of trust segmentation. So the web zone can't talk to the DD zone and so forth. As I looked at that data yesterday, there's 700 flows coming in and out of that environment on 25 VMs on 5 hosts. So if I start out that small, in 30 days when we go into our production server, I'm going to have 250, 300 VMs all of a sudden reporting data. How can you get from crawl to run? I can't go to every application server and sit down with somebody one by one to say, okay, your server's doing 40 flows here because that's going to take you 4 or 5 years. Because by the time I get to the end, they've introduced another 100 servers for me to do this with. So how are you guys doing that, and what makes it work? Because the amount of data coming out of Bernie is massive for a small environment. Never mind when I expand.
I had the same situation. 2 days after we installed Vernie, looked at it, and we had 60 or 70,000 flows. And we're like, okay, what are we going to do with this? That's a lot. And it really just came down to what was the priority. You know, for us, it was securing data. So you start on your databases and you work your way up. You know, that worked for us. And a lot of things get grouped. I mean, it's not you have to write a rule for every single one of those. It's wide sweeping. You know, DHCP and DNS and those basic services, you can cut out a lot of that pretty quickly. Those are things you look at first. Your core services, what it is you want to secure, what you're looking at, and then just work up from there.
Yeah, I took a look, I drilled down to one server, and I looked at, on one of our AirWatch device servers. And if you look at the documentation for AirWatch, it'll tell you, oh, this server's going to need these 5 ports. Well, there's 40 flows going to get out of that server. It's not just 5 ports, so it's just massive.
But every source destination port is a different flow and IP. So I don't know, but if you do look at that stuff without kind of narrowing down like a destination port or using VRNI, Network Insight, to kind of narrow down what you're actually looking at, which is you can do on the left-hand side as you're looking at those flows, it can be very overwhelming because, every time a host does a DHCP query, that's a whole separate flow. So your DNS server may have hundreds of thousands of flows on it, but they're all DNS flows. But because each source IP and port differ, it's a different unique flow.
And I guess to follow up, when you talked about some of the devices, Bernie is licensed by Taurus on the clusters. How does it license separate devices, or are those just, go ahead and add them without a problem?
Yeah, it's the latter. Yeah, wow. It is, as you said. So one of our one of the key things that we wanted to do is keep licensing really simple. That's why we don't charge when you are adding physical devices, because it's part of our visibility story. So you're paying for on a per CPU basis, but you don't have to pay extra to add network switches and firewalls and stuff like that. Yeah. So out of time. Quick round of one key takeaway for the audience to wrap it up.
Key takeaway? I don't know. Tool's great. When our guy installed it, he's like, man, you got to look at this. This is incredible. So.
It works for small to large infrastructure, and it's really easy to deploy, and it's a little daunting at first, but once you get the hang of it, the command line at the top can be really, really powerful for what you're looking for when you're being asked questions about what is this doing and why isn't this working. And I know I'll hit on it that in 3.5 you'll actually start seeing block flows, which will be really, really a nice add to the product, which is here soon, I think.
September 5th.
Yeah.
Take advantage of the free assessment. I mean, just use it, put it in your environment.
Yep, great. So thanks again for being here. Hope you guys have a good rest of VMworld. And a big thank you to our panelists. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.